It is Tuesday, July 27th at 6:34, and this is the Groton Town Council Committee of the Whole meeting. All councilors are present with the exception of Councilor Franco, who will be late due to a family commitment, or she may not be able to attend, I'm not sure, but it is a family commitment. Calendar and communications, Councilor Baumgartner.
No report.
Councilor Parker.
I attended the Groton Middle School Media Center dedication for the library for Dr. Grenier. Congratulations again, Dr. Grenier, and it was a wonderful tribute. And just emails concerning from constituents regarding matters that we'll be discussing, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Heed.
Yes, I have two things. First of all, on July 13th, I attended the Personnel and Appointments Committee meeting with Chair Melendez and Councilor Zapiri. And then Councilor Zapiri and Councilor Aubry and I were working on trying to get COVID vaccination clinics set up around town. We were trying to target a few things. One of the things that we were working with Mayor Granatoski and Juan Melendez, Councilor Melendez, helped us set something up at the DEI sponsored International Food Truck Festival this past weekend, but it was canceled. So that will be now, that's postponed until October. So I called Ledgelight, and they're going to bring a vaccination truck to the first night out on August 3rd. But as I was discussing it with them, I found out they are providing the Moderna vaccination. So obviously people under 18 aren't approved to get that vaccine. So we were looking for a few other locations where we might be able to get a Pfizer vaccine distributed. And I put in a call to the Board of Ed to see, not the Board of Ed, to Susan Austin to see if we could partner with them and have some put at the food distribution centers for the summer food program. So she was going to work on that. So stay tuned. Still a work in progress.
Excellent. Thank you both for working on that. Councilor Aubry, communications.
Nothing this week, thank you.
Councilor Bordelon, communications.
Just the same emails that everybody else received. Also some contact with the Mystic Oral School group who asked me some questions regarding looking at the project and my support or not support for it. As I have stated openly, I am not in support of the project, and I have been reached out by them to ask questions. Thank you.
Councilor Melendez.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I also attended the dedication of the Groton Middle School Library with Councilor Parker and Mayor Granatoski. And I just want to thank our former superintendent for his service to the town. That's all.
Thank you. Councilor Zapiri.
I am most appreciative of Councilor Heed's report about getting the vaccination, mobile vaccinations at more functions. As you know, I've been harping on this subject for the last 2 months, hoping that we could get the council to take a leadership role in promoting vaccinations. It's very important that people get vaccinated. I think there was an implication that folks wanted to hear from a real doctor before they went off on this track. But the Surgeon General has come out and has asked that local governments, state governments and local governments, and the leaders in those organizations make a public statement that it is vitally important that people get vaccinated. Those who are holding out on vaccination are not only risking their own lives, but they're creating a pool where this virus can replicate and mutate. And we already have seen this Delta variant is not as it is susceptible to the vaccine, but not so much as the other variants had been before it. And as this variant is infecting people, it will mutate again and again and again. Don't forget, every individual with the virus replicates trillions and trillions of those viruses. And one or two of them can come out to be something that will not be controlled by the vaccine, and we'll be back to square one with this pandemic. I think it's vitally important that people get vaccinated, and I think we as the leadership of this community should make a public statement and repeatedly implore people to get vaccinated. So I repeated myself again for the, I don't know how many times over the last 2 months. Forgive me.
Thank you. Okay, I attended the long-term recovery meeting on Wednesday, July 14th. We had Mr. Bronk present, Mayor Hedrick, Ms. Harkin, Ms. Patrick, and then Councilors Baumgartner and Bordelon, as well as Moderator Evan. We talked about promoting the Unite CT program for rent relief. And then we had, most of our time was spent on ARPA funding allocation and distribution process. And we were waiting to hear back. There was a COG meeting coming up, and where they were going to be discussing a position that could potentially be of use. We asked some questions, and we were looking for some information to come back to us for our next meeting, which is August 4th. So at our August 4th meeting, then we'll be making a recommendation asking the council how we wish to proceed. I also attended the Groton Middle School dedication. That was quite an honor to be there. It was amazing to be in that building. It's a beautiful building. You should all be very proud. The whole town should be proud of what we were able to accomplish with the Groton 2020 program. I was also able to attend the rededication of the Avery Memorial, which is the property across from CVS with the marble pillar. The family gathers there every year, and it was enlightening. As a history teacher, I enjoyed very much learning a little bit more about the family. The connection is the gentleman, the Avery gentleman that lived there, was the clerk at the time of the town, and when the spark from the railroad tracks caught the house on fire, he very quick-wittedly grabbed the safe. So we owe a debt of gratitude to Mr. Avery. Thank you. Approval of the minutes. Mr. Byrd, do you have communications?
I do.
Councilor Baumgartner, approval of the minutes. This is on page 2.
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve the Committee of the Whole special meeting minutes of July 6, 2021.
Second.
And the meeting minutes of July 13, 2021. So moved.
Second, Bordelon.
Moved by Baumgartner and seconded by Bordelon. Any discussion on the meeting minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved unanimously. We are at 8 councilors this evening. Thank you. We have a change in schedule of the agenda. The gentleman who was going to be here for 5B, Groton Heights property update, had a death in the family, so he can't be with us. That's going to be scheduled for August. So our condolences to Mr. Hine and his family. And Mr. Mathenall is here for Sister Cities, and he has another commitment. He has to leave in exactly 15 minutes. So our representatives from DOT, Ms. Pfaffinger, has graciously agreed to allow Mr. Mathenall to join us first. So we are going to have 5C as our first item on the agenda. Mr. Mathenall, if you'd like to come up, please. And this is on page 30 of your packet. If you could just state your name and tell everybody who you are, and then you could give us your brief introduction.
Thank you. So, Josh Mathenall from 67 Tyler Avenue, city resident, Town of Groton EDC member for the longest time, also fiduciary of the state of Connecticut's CTNX, CTMBI, and also diversity and equity for the state. So I'm here today purely for the follow-up conversation, so to speak, to refresh your mind that not too long ago we had a delegation back in 2019 from the diplomats from Jamaica who toured our region and was extraordinarily pleased and thrilled by the hospitality of our New England style fashion. And we are keen to resume the conversation and conclude to some aspirational level a sister city MOU that we had voted on back in 2019 to kick off and unfortunately because of COVID, we did not continue with the paperwork. We just paused. So what we're having just come about is they are having their 59th Independence Day celebration next week, and for that, some senior members of the country are traveling to New York to celebrate their National Day or Independence Day. And they chose Connecticut as their second stop to come and extend their hand of friendship. And they would like to also visit and say hi to everybody and try and move the needle forward with some kind of a brief token friendship agreement where nothing is tied down per se that this is what we will do, but other than we're going to exchange tourism, we're going to exchange education, we're going to exchange technology as what we just basically would do as much as we would do with Facebook or with somebody that we don't know in LinkedIn we may extend to. But obviously this is much more significant. Connecticut has the largest diaspora of Jamaicans. New York has significant. And we also see the opportunity here to diversify our business of southeastern Connecticut into the logistics realm. May it be rail, shipping, air, what it may be. But I also see that there's an opportunity, as I understand from my colleagues in Hartford, there's a growing sentiment of desire for tourism among the West Indies population in the state. And if us here in Groton, New London, were to be the nexus of those participation, collaboration, brotherhood, sisterhood, and partnership, that would provide our town and cities much more of a shining beacon. So next week, they're looking to come in. So we have a state minister for foreign affairs, Jamaican diaspora, trade, and then we also have the worshipful mayor of Kingston that's coming as well. And for most of you who may not be familiar, the mayor of Kingston has that kind of status as the mayor of New York does. So he's fairly up there. And so he's coming as well as you may have met the Consul General. She will be coming, and then there's a whole retinue of folks coming here. So initially, and I'd like to thank the town manager for all his coordination effort, putting pen to paper and making things happen, because obviously without John Budd progressing on a lot of this, as well as Mayor Hedrick and Mayor Pissarro playing a key role in pinpointing some conversation with these delegations that would be strategic for us. We cannot, obviously, I'm nobody, but they have the way of getting things forward. So what they're looking to do is come here on the third, tour around, see what has changed since 2019, and ideally on the next day, very rapidly in the morning, sign that aspirational MOU. I don't know whether you had a chance to review it, but it's just, I mean, anybody would. So to sign that, and then they need to get a hop on the plane in 4 hours or 5 hours in New York, so they'd be dashing out. So that's basically the whole program.
Okay, thank you. And just in your, I believe you sent both the short form and the long form version, and I believe the City of Groton, Mayor Hedrick, and the City of New London, Mayor Passero, have both approved the short form version,
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
Okay.
because that removes the attorneys and whatnot. It's just whatever that needs to happen in terms of commerce, in terms of education, in terms of any other tertiary activities, it will be done and negotiated, discussed individually for the fiscal reasons they are. So we don't, so the idea here is at least stick the hand out. That's all.
Yeah,
And I know Councilor Zuberi was one of the earliest proponent of, and thank you.
All right, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Mathenall? Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming tonight and presenting this. I think it's really important when we collaborate with other countries and cities, sister cities, or states, or countries, or however that may be. And it's really nice, and it can be used as an education tool for our students in our school system, as well as our community to expand on our growth. I was excited. I was not able to attend the first part of the visitation when they had come the last time, but I did meet them in New London at the end of the tour, and it was very nice. They were very welcoming, and we had some great conversations, and they were very open and extended the hand to come visit there. And as you stated, COVID had come, so, but I definitely look forward to maybe trying to get out there myself. So I'm excited to see where this will go, and I'm excited for them to come on the 3rd, and is that the date that you said?
3rd and 4th.
3rd and 4th. But I think it's a great opportunity for the town of Groton. So thank you for your initiatives.
Well, there's also another element that I would like to add. We talked about education history. Jamaica was the first country that created the Royal Jamaican Corporation that created the slave trade. And education, as we understand, is learning the roots of where all of our background and history came from. And having that relationship with Jamaica also would provide a way to enlighten our students. Forget about CRT and all that abbreviations, but just to know history of New England, the history of how things came about, where things came about, what was the root. I think if we don't know our history, we won't know our past, and we don't know how to plan our ways forward. So I think that is very, very good. One last request from them is if the good town manager could assist in assisting fixing them with a hotel of choice for the sleepover. Whichever the town feels would be. And I know somebody who's looking at me who's very powerful in the hotelier business. So
I just had one more thing to ask about. You said something about West Indies, and I might have missed it. Is that something that you're looking to expand upon at a later time? Or?
Yes.
I think that's great. There's a huge West Indies population in
Yes.
London. I happen to be part of that population.
Yes.
And they are a strong back in this area that have come over from the islands into
Yes.
New London and New York. So that's very exciting.
a lot of them would happen from the African continent. They came to Jamaica historically, and then from Jamaica spread out
Yeah.
all around that whole whatever they could touch over there.
Yeah.
So I think historically, learning the history of Jamaica would be a good educational road trip for all our students in this region.
Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions? Would
Good
anyone,
job, George.
would anyone like to put a motion on the floor? I will make a motion that the council approve the short-term twinning agreement with Kingston, Jamaica.
Second.
So the motion on the floor is that the council would approve the short-form twinning agreement with Kingston, Jamaica. I don't know why it's doing that. Is there any discussion on that? I believe we all have that. I don't think we need to read it into the record at this point because it was part of the packet. Any discussion? Councilor Bordelon?
I think it would be important to read it into the record so folks at home that aren't,
Would you like to do so?
I have trouble with my eyesight, as I've stated to you many times, but if someone else is willing to, I think it'd be great. I think it'd be great for the record.
I can read.
Thank you.
A memorandum, of understanding for the establishment of sister city relationship between the town of Groton, city of Groton, city of New London, Connecticut, with the city of Kingston, Jamaica, recognizing the opportunities for mutually beneficial practical exchanges in the fields of arts, business, culture, education, health, sports, and tourism, etc., declaring to foster those goals, the people of Groton, New London, and Kingston, in a gesture of friendship and goodwill, agree to collaborate for the meaningful relationships between the parties, shall strive as follows: to promote and expand the effective and mutually beneficial cooperation between the people of Groton, New London, and Kingston, and to promote international goodwill, understanding, and expanded business relationships between the municipalities and their respective region by the exchange of people, ideas, and information in a wide variety of economic, social, cultural, municipal, environmental, professional, technical, youth, and other endeavors, and to foster and encourage cultural, scientific, trade and commerce, literacy, and educational activities between the cities.
Thank you for
I so
reading that.
move. Oh, sorry.
That's all right. It's already done. Thank you. Is there discussion? Any discussion now that we have everything official? Councilor Heaton.
I would like to ask Town Manager John Burt, what are the staffing requirements to pursue something like this?
Nothing at this point. No.
Okay.
Only if we ever took it more further.
Good. Perfect.
Councilor Melendez.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have a question. I see that there's two versions here, and there's also New London and the city of Groton involved. Are they doing the same version we're doing? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes, the city passed it last night, I believe, is the word I had from.
So the other version, I discounted it because I did not want the complexity of, because they're trying to figure out what is our protocol, and they're trying to be legalese for our sake. And I said, we are friends. Just stick with the.
I agree, because I think the sentiment, as you said, it's a handshake, and anything further that we would decide to do would have to be sorted out in great detail. So we're better off going with this version up front, and then as each project comes on the radar, then our council and their council can all work together to smooth everything out.
Yep.
All right.
And if you want to add a line or two in there.
No, they'd have to take it back to the other
Right.
city councils.
But to be honest, they are just trepidatious. They were hoping that it was sufficient
Yes.
on your end as well as New London and City of Groton's end,
Right.
just to see if it was fine. It's a draft that if you want to change something, they're happy to accommodate. They are just grateful that you're going to spare time and a short notice to visit, see them, and host them. That's, for them in a British sense, very grateful.
It will be lovely, I'm sure. All right, seeing no further discussion, we will vote to approve the short-term 20 agreement with Kingston, Jamaica. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, Mr. Mathenam. I think you'll be able to get to your son on time. All right, we are going to start at the top of the agenda again. 5A, 2021-560, Connecticut DOT, Proposed Improvements I-95 Allen Street. This was on page 12 in your packet. We have several people here. We have Mr. Hanover. We have Marissa Faffinger, who is the project manager, Highway Management Unit, and Mr. Eamon Basic as well. Would you like to come on up? Mr. Hanover, you're welcome to start whenever you're ready.
Sure. I'll just do a brief introduction. Greg Hanover, Director of Public Works, and I have the pleasure this evening of having Marissa Faffinger, Project Manager, and M. Basic, the Project Engineer for the Connecticut Department of Transportation Planning Unit. We'll be presenting tonight what I would consider major intersection improvements at the I-95 north and southbound exit and entrance ramps with Allen Street, and also Sandy Hollow Road and Allen Street because of its, it's right there. It's immediately adjacent, as everybody knows. And anybody that's been out there, during rush hour knows that this project is probably long overdue. So with that, I think, we're really seeking council's input and comments at this time. This is really early on in the process. Town manager and I thought it was appropriate to bring it to the council at this time for your input. There will be certainly a public participation process, as DOT does a great job with that as they go through this project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Marissa.
Thank you all so much. Marissa Passenger with the Connecticut DOT. This is actually my first, thank you so much. This is actually my first in-person meeting in about 18 months, so thank you all for having us. And if I do get a little mumbly with the mask, please just feel free to jump in and let me know. So thank you for the introduction, Greg. As he said, we are sort of at the very beginning of this process. Proposed project 58111, which is just how we would identify it. Safety and operational improvements at the intersection of the Interstate 95 ramps and Allen Street and Sandy Hollow Road. So my name is Marissa Passenger, and with me is Emin Basic, and we are part of the Highway Management Unit. That basically just means that we are the first group that gets to take something from an idea and try to turn it into a project. So we are still very early in the process here. We actually have the great opportunity to be able to look at new situations and try to figure out the right way to address them. And I bring that up just because while we do have some great information to share here tonight, including some engineering plans and drawings, I just want everyone to be aware that we are still very early. No funding has been allocated towards this project, and if it were to advance, there's still roughly a 2 to 3 year design period that would be expected before any construction could actually begin. That being said, we did have the opportunity to meet with Greg and some of the other town staff in April of this year. We reviewed the concept that we had to date, and as he noted, thought it would be a great opportunity to come to the town council, review where this has been in the past, where we see it going in the future, and provide your group an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So our agenda for this evening, we'll start with background and existing conditions. We'll talk about the proposed concept, provide some information on essentially a before and after comparison, if the improvements are implemented, what that would mean for different traffic operations. We'll do an overall summary of the project as a whole, and then open it up for any questions or comments. So to kick it off and start, so with our background in existing conditions, as some of you may be aware, this concept was actually originally proposed as part of a 2004 I-95 East Corridor study that looked at the entirety of I-95 from New Haven all the way to the Rhode Island line. This was a breakout project that was proposed under that, essentially the signalization of the 2 ramps as part of Interchange 89. And it was identified largely because of the operational deficiencies for projected traffic volumes over the long period of time. After that study was completed, there was a project that was initiated in the late 2000s that was main focus was actually on the main line, on pavement improvements and some safety operational on the main line itself. However, for a variety of reasons over time, funding limitations and otherwise, that project has not advanced to the construction phase. But as part of that process, the design team did recognize the standalone benefits of addressing this particular interchange. And in, I think, 2020 of last year, they did come to us in the HMU, the Highway Management Unit, and ask that we take a look at this and evaluate whether or not the benefits did have standalone independent value as a project, and that's where Emin and I got involved. So since that time, we've been reviewing the area, updating some of the information, and have a concept in place that we're ready to advance, and part of that is answering questions on the local behalf and talking about any next steps that might be from there. So for that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Emin for the meat of the rest of the presentation, but we'll be happy to take any questions at the end if anyone has any.
Thank you very much. My name is Emin Basic, and I was a project engineer for this project. So to start off, just a brief general description of the area. We have I-95 north and southbound running east and west on the page. The secondary highway, which is SR 614 or Allen Street, running north and south. And then a zoom in of the area we're going to be talking about is the ramp intersections, as well as Sandy Hollow Road, being the local road that's going to be involved with this project. There we go. Okay. Crash history of it is, there's 50 total crashes. When we do crash histories, we look at most recent 3-year span. From these crashes, they're spread out, and involved was about 8 injuries. As you can expect, given the circumstances, with it being free flow on SR 614, meaning there's no stop control, just the ramps are stop controlled, you can expect the high speeds are going to yield to angle type crashes, which is usually the ones that result in injury. The average daily traffic going north to south, it's going to get a little tricky because the most intersections are the southbound I-95. The southern ones are the northbound. But for the rest of the presentation, we're going to go north to south, just for general descriptions. So 8,200 vehicles are north of the southbound ramps. 10,500 vehicles per day are between the 2 ramps. 12,100 vehicles are south of the northbound ramp, so these are the southern intersections, and 8,800 vehicles per day are south of Sandy Hollow Road. So as you can expect, most traffic is getting onto I-95. So the efforts that we undertook was the initial handoff meeting from that 2004 I-95 study. So with that being a little bit dated, we added a request for volumes to be updated, and we modeled different scenarios, those scenarios being the existing condition, the signalizing of just the ramps, which is what they had in their proposal, and then we saw through our analysis that we really need to do something at Sandy Hollow Road, given its proximity to those southern ramps. Then the proposed alternative, which is what we're going to be presenting about. We also spoke with internal units to talk about some environmental concerns, because those usually clog up the whole design process. And then we're going to be working on delivering a final scoping package that's going to hopefully get initiated into a project and into construction eventually. So the proposed concept, once again, we're going to be going north to south, is the northern southbound I-95 ramps. The current geometry there is a stop control coming off the I-95, and a free flow right, as we call it, and a left turn coming southbound on SR 614. So what we're proposing is adding, signalizing this intersection, and adding a left turn coming southbound on SR 614 on Allen Street, and a right turn pocket to get rid of that free flow right, and doing a 2-lane split coming off of the interchange. We'll go into more details, but just a general conceptual design. At the southern ramps, what we're going to be doing is changing the existing stop control geometry off the ramp and the free flows to essentially the same thing, where we're going to be adding left turn lanes with protected phasing, which means we're going to allow those left turning cars some limited amount of time to make that movement without oncoming traffic coming at them. And then we're also going to be doing a 4-lane cross-section down to Sandy Hollow Road. And the next slide is going to show that a little bit more clear. At Sandy Hollow Road, it's the current stop-controlled configuration, but with its proximity to those southbound interchange ramps, it's about 250 feet. Usually what that means for us is there's going to be some kind of implication, either good or usually negative, as was the case with Sandy Hollow Road. So you had traffic backing up, which we'll see in the simulation. So south of Sandy Hollow Road, we have 2 through lanes going down towards Mystic and 2 through lanes coming into the intersection, just shy of where the existing sidewalk by approximately 200 feet ends. So that's going to be essentially the project limits. So for an overall view, we're looking at this is north is going to the east over here now. It's basically what you see there coming off the northbound I-95 right at the terminus of the southbound ramps, and a couple 100 feet and 100 feet west on Sandy Hollow Road intersection. So as far as what we're actually going to be doing in terms of visualizing it, this is the proposed design. So this is at, once again, the northern ramps. So what we're going to do by signalizing is it's going to improve the efficiency of the intersection. It's going to allow more volume to proceed through, because when we go through these design phases, we're not looking today. We're looking 20 years into the future. Plus, whatever developments that the DOT is currently aware of, we incorporate those volumes as well. So looking at the northern ramps, the existing free flow onto southbound is going to be removed, and that right turn pocket is going to basically take all of those vehicle volumes and accommodate that. And then the splitting up of that left turn pocket with protected phasing is essentially going to try and mitigate some of those serious angle type crashes. At the southern ramp and Sandy Hollow Road, same thing. The signals are going to improve the efficiency of the vehicular traffic, as well as get rid of the existing extends onto the main line. All of that in our simulation is dissipated. What we included in our conversations with Greg and other town staff was the connection of sidewalk from where it currently is to, forgive me, but I forgot what the daycare was it? To where the daycare sidewalk is, plus a protected crossing again across Allen Street. And then another thing that we incorporated was throughout this whole stretch, we incorporated at minimum a 4-foot shoulder on the east side. So all the construction we're going to be doing is going to be confined to the east side of the roadway. Any potential widening, any things like that, and minimal disturbances to the west side of Allen Street. So the before and after comparison with regards to how traffic flows. Where's the mouse? There we go.
So Emmett prepared a number of traffic simulation videos just to demonstrate sort of part of our process, as well as a graphical indication of what the traffic operations look like today versus in the future with this. So it's a video that we've prepared to just demonstrate, part of our process and help to illustrate the differences between the two scenarios.
Yeah, it worked a couple of minutes ago. There we go. So essentially what you can see here, we analyze the peak hour, which is the most voluminous hour of operation at this network. And what you can see there, the northbound, and this is 2020, so these are counts as current of July of last year. There's not too much concern right now, but when we look at it in 2040, under the existing configuration, you can see significant volume buildup and queues building up. And this is the buildup on the off-ramp. In our simulation, this has been going on for 50 minutes of the peak hour. And when you extrapolate this to the 2040 volumes, you see that that intersection at Sandy Hollow Road, which we'll see builds up in a little bit as the simulation plays, is completely exacerbated. In 2040, it's essentially backed up past where the network is shown on the screen from both sides. So those are the existing conditions with the stop control coming off the off-ramps and essentially the one-lane configuration all across the whole network.
I do want to note, too, that for the sake of the simulation, this is, I think, it's about 4 times as fast.
Yes.
So it might look like everybody is zipping through there, but we do show it at about 4 times speed, just so that we're not watching, at every second of it.
So at the 2040 design volumes, there's, like I said, significantly much more traffic. There's essentially minimal queuing going on at the northern ramps. So this is where we added those left turn lanes and the right turn onto I-95. At the more concerning south intersections, you can see that that queue on the ramp is essentially completely eliminated, given the fact that we're going to be proposing a free flow right now. And that little section in between Sandy Hollow Road and that intersection should accommodate the approximately 80 cars that are making a right onto Sandy Hollow Road. So that's coming southbound off Allen Street onto Sandy Hollow Road in the 2040 design year. So right right now there's significantly less cars making that movement. And what I'm doing here is just speeding up essentially the whole simulation just to show throughout the entire peak hour. There's really no areas of concern. Sandy Hollow Road provides enough protection for those cars to exit it without queues building up. And like I said, the big takeaway from this is the angle crashes, the ones causing the injuries, are hopefully going to be reduced. And the whole corridor, cars going through the whole corridor here, aren't going to be subject to vehicles backing up all the way to the main line on I-95. Yep. So that's the comparison. And then a quick summary of the project. The issue is the stop control, which greatly takes away from the efficiency of the intersections at both ramps, and the proximity of Sandy Hollow Road to those south ramps where we saw queues building up in our analysis. The crash history that we saw, the 50 crashes with 8 injuries, and the congestion backing up onto the main line I-95 off the off-ramps. And what we're proposing is the signalization of those 2 intersections, changing some of the geometry, getting rid of the free flow right, bringing that a nice right turn pocket in to accommodate all those vehicles, and tightening up the intersectional area in addition to providing that bicycle shoulder all the way through the whole corridor from north to south along the east side, and that pedestrian connection, the sidewalk, and the protected crossing across Allen Street. So with all of that, this is estimated cost, so it's going to change by the time it goes into construction, is a price tag of $5 million. So that includes construction, engineering, and potential environmental concerns and that sort of thing. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Marissa for next steps.
So yes, thank you. So at this point, again, as Emma noted, the concept is just that it is a concept, and the cost, while we get it as close as we can, we do recognize that during the design phase, certain things might pop up that could affect that. But that's a general best guess that for what we would consider a project of this type would cost. So while the actual number might end up being a 4.2 or a 5.1, something like that, that's the ballpark of what we would expect there. As far as next steps go, after our meeting today, there are some internal approvals that would need to happen before a project could be initiated. Assuming that there was no significant opposition on the part of the town and we were able to just move forward with our process, we would be able to gain our managerial support for that, and then would come a discussion about exactly what pot of funding this would qualify for. That's generally not a concern as far as finding the money for it, especially a project of this size, doesn't blow the bank on our available resources. That being said, that funding would need to come in place. We would expect there to be federal participation. The typical percentage split would be an 80% federal, 20% state. So there'd be no town contribution to a project of this nature. And then once that was all essentially certified and moved along, as we said, it's generally a 2 to 3 year full design phase, and that's from the time approval happens to construction. So that does take into account some of the behind the scenes paperwork that needs to happen. Once a design team is officially assigned to this project, there would be a more public opportunity for comments of the public, not just the town council itself, via a public information meeting. That generally happens around the 30% mark of a project, and that gives opportunity for the public to see the good engineering work that's been done, but not so late in the process that things couldn't be tweaked if there is other opportunities for change. I will say, though, that as part of our conversations with the town, and also you have great resources available online, we have tried to incorporate as many of those things into this concept as we can. Accommodating for different bicyclists being one thing, the sidewalk connections. We're aware that Sandy Hollow Road has a local designation as a scenic road. So those are different elements that we try to take into consideration as soon as we can to help our designers be able to move through that process as fast as possible. So with that, if there are any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. Mr. Hanover, did you want to add anything before I open it up? Very good. Councilors? Councilor Bordelon?
Thank you. First, I just want to thank the nicely well-designed simulation with the video enhancement. I think that really gives a great visual to see exactly that highway has always been a concern, and the most dangerous part from my own knowing is it backing onto the highway, because all of a sudden you're just driving on a casual day, and it stops without any notice, and it's backed all the way up. And I've seen, as you stated, a lot of accidents there. But also from the Sandy Howell connection, once you're there, people are stuck at those intersections because they're not sure if the person coming off the highway that doesn't have a light is going to advance, and they're not sure if they should turn. It really creates such a debacle. I do also like the fact that you're looking at the future as, advancing something that is going to be moving and looking at, what it would look like in 40 years. There is potential for a new development to come into that area. Has that been incorporated into this?
I believe so, yes.
So the development volumes that we have are, so the volumes that are included is for the Mystic Education Center, mixed-use development. Is that the development that you're referencing? Okay, yeah, so those volumes are included as received by the DOT.
Perfect. I think it's I think it's needed, and it's very important. Mystic is becoming more popular, and people use that accent quite frequently. So I appreciate you guys' thorough process and really explain it, and nicely done on the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
Councilor Melendez and then Aubrey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I talked on the phone with Councilor Franco, and she made a good point. When you get off the I-95 South ramp and you turn right, there's no street lights there, and it's like really dark at night. So is there any way, like in the project, up until that first intersection right there, I think it's Ledgeland and Cow Hill, and yeah, that's from the 95 South ramp till that intersection, maybe have street lights there. Is that a possibility?
So that's a great suggestion. That's actually a great example of why we love coming to town council meetings early to learn that public knowledge. So that was not something that we had incorporated into it, but we'll certainly make a note. There is a sort of a defined process for when lighting is warranted versus when it's not, but we can track that down and certainly incorporate that into the process, and if it is warranted, see that it would be incorporated. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Councilor Aubrey.
In the process of doing this, is there any consideration for the signs for these exits and et cetera?
So not generally. Generally, the main line, meaning I-95 itself, those projects tend to move through with.
Could you put that up just a little?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yep, thank you. So those projects generally tend to move through with more of a programmatic approach, and there is an active. Excuse me, folks. Sorry about that. Throwing your equipment around. There is an active project that's looking to upgrade the pavement condition as well as the roadside safety features and the signing. So anything on the main line would be covered under that project. If there was a need, if for some reason there wasn't a sign that should have been, we would look at that under this project. But we are trying to focus most of the improvements off of the main line on this because that's where really the purpose and need of the project is focused. But your point is certainly taken, and we can follow up with the design team to see if that is a concern or if that's something on their radar. If there's anything in particular that you're concerned about, you can also please feel free to follow up with us after the meeting if it's a specific concern, and we can track that down.
There's always been a lot of conversation about the fact that there's no signage there for Mystic, and I think it would be less confusing to people coming into the area if they knew that that was Mystic proper or Mystic something, but you go further to get to the venues that most people are looking for. But for people that are coming that want to go to the downtown Mystic, rather than going further and getting caught in the traffic and coming all the way around, it might be something to think about.
Absolutely, and our Division of Traffic Engineering does have, a process in place for traction signing, things of that nature. So that's certainly something that we can follow up with as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Heed.
Were you up? Okay. Actually, to the point of Councilor Aubrey, I believe the residents who live in Mystic might not like those signs, so that would be something to discuss further during the public portion of it. But I'd also suggest maybe we look into what we would need to do traffic-wise if those signs were to go in and the traffic ended up going down in that direction.
So to that end, we could certainly provide, maybe with Greg as a contact, the attraction signing. I think we do have a policy in place, and provide that to the town for your own use, as far as, you know, what the request would need to state and what the requirements for actually having that signing provided on the expressway would be. It may or may not actually fit in with the distances, because there are certain requirements for that. But that's information that we'd be happy to follow up with and provide.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Zepari.
If the two of you have business cards, I'd like to have one for each of you.
I certainly have one, and I can put Emmons information on it as well. We'd be more than happy to. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Granatowski, Baumgartner, Bordelon. Okay. Thank you for your presentation. It's enlightening. I really enjoyed the graphic. It really helps to drive home. And that will be part of the presentation that the public can watch, so they'll be able to see that. My first question was, if the public wishes to comment before you schedule the actual public meeting at the 30% mark, how can they reach you? Should we give them your contact here? Is there something you'd like us to put up on screen when we put this out there?
So we'd be more than happy to provide a PDF version of the presentation as well. If you have the opportunity to post that on your website or whatever your forum might be for that, we can do that, as well as contact information for me. Generally, at this point, if the type of questions that would be sort of best to be answered would be the ones about the specifics of, can you explain X, Y, or Z? There's a lot of components that, because we are so early, we don't necessarily know the answer to. We certainly welcome whatever feedback might come out of this, and would be receptive of anything, but there's a lot of unknowns that get solved during the design phase. So I do just want to put that out there, that we won't have an answer to everything, but if anyone does have a question, they are more than welcome to reach out via email.
Okay, so then we should just use the emails that are on screen right now.
Correct,
For the
yes.
public.
Yep.
And those are available for the public to use as well.
Yes. Yep.
Excellent. Second question is kind of following up with what the Councilor Heed had said earlier regarding the signage. And if there would be the decision made by the state to change the signage at that intersection, and know that it will create further problems the closer you get into Mystic proper, because you're going to be funneling more people onto another road, Route 1, which is also yours.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a domino effect if signage would go in place. So I just wanted to state that out there.
Understood.
Thank you. Councilor Baumgartner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your very in-depth presentation. I too enjoyed the simulations, being able to visualize kind of what the real-life impacts will be of your design. So thank you for that. I saw the addition of sidewalk, which is great. Obviously, a very important enhancement in terms of safety. By and large, is there kind of a net reduction in pavement, or reduction in the actual width of the roadway? Just I know anecdotally that typically when there's a big project and the design focuses on road diets, it inevitably makes the road safer because cars, especially when it's more congested, will choose to drive a little bit slower. And just I didn't realize how many accidents were within that corridor within a 3-year period. 50 I think is pretty considerable. So have you factored that into your design as well, including road diet of sorts?
So no road diet per se, but definitely some removal of pavement, particularly at the northern intersection, the southbound ramps where there is a free flow right today, and the removal of that will reduce some of the impervious area, which is generally a benefit for the environmental concerns. One of the things that we did try to be very cautious of and cognizant of during the design process was maintaining the edge of road wherever possible, so essentially not creating more pavement wherever it was. I believe the lane widths, I need you to help me here, but yeah.
Yeah, so to elaborate on that point, basically what we tried to do was keep that consistent cross-section, especially north of the south ramps, so that's where that overpass bridge is, because we're not touching the bridge cross-section now, we're just moving the pavement markings, and that's wide enough cross-sections for us to accommodate what we need. But really the area of concern I believe you're referencing is that crossing location at Sandy Hollow Road. We are changing it from a 2-lane current existing cross-section to a 4-lane. The width is expanding minimally, but to mitigate that increase in potential risk, we are providing that crosswalk across Allen Street. So that protected crosswalk is going to stop all traffic. So essentially, pedestrians are going to be only ones crossing. No vehicular traffic that could potentially conflict with that. And that's only for that little bit of stretch where we needed to accommodate that right turn move. That's it.
And will that crosswalk be signalized?
Yes, it's called an exclusive pedestrian crossing. So even at that intersection, it's basically the walk, don't walk sign that you see with a countdown. So that's what we're proposing to do there.
Now, were any of those traffic accidents involving pedestrians or cyclists?
No, out of those recent 3 years, so going back more than 3 years, there could potentially be, but as far as the 3 years are concerned, that was mostly all actually vehicular or a fixed object that didn't involve a pedestrian.
And lastly, in terms of bicycle improvements, obviously you'll continue to have a shoulder, but will there be any markations or enhancements to almost make it a bike lane of sorts as opposed to just simply a shoulder?
So to do a true bike lane, we're not going to be doing any kind of additional pavement markings to denote it as a bike lane, given the fact that there are standards that you need to follow. So with us trying to stay within the cross-section, not impact the bridge, carry it all the way from that southern portion of the project limits to the northern portion, we are providing that at minimal. It's in most areas 6 feet wide shoulder, but as far as standards are concerned, we're not proposing to put any kind of different color pavement marking or pavement markings on the pavement itself to say this is a bike lane. Okay.
So we're essentially providing the adequate width for what could be considered a bike lane, but generally as a DOT policy, if there are additional markings that go hand in hand, we do often look to the cities and towns to do the maintenance on those markings as well. So if that was something that the city did or the town wanted to consider, we could certainly include that as part of the conversation as well, but at this point we're not proposing a full marked bike lane. I should note too that, as Emmett mentioned, the bridge structure itself that does go over I-95, that is actually our limiting feature for how wide our shoulder can be. We are actually reducing some of the lane widths over the bridge itself in order to maintain that 4-foot shoulder. 4 feet is the minimum for what would be considered a rideable shoulder. Other than that, people would be exposed into the lane. So we are trying to accommodate that the best as possible, but with the bridge being a large structure that we're not proposing to impact in any way, that does become the limiting factor. However, on both sides of it, where we can provide a wider shoulder, that is the goal.
Well, I would say any improvement we can make to ensure that pedestrians and cyclists are safe for the foreseeable future. Obviously, in your simulation, there will be potentially a significant increase in traffic, and so any mitigation you can take in that respect, it's great. So, look forward to continuing to see your great work, and thank you for coming down today.
Thank you for your comments. Yes.
Councilor Bordelon for your second time.
Thank you. I just wanted to align my marks with Councilor Heed in regards just to the neighborhood there. Growing up off High Street over in that area, I do remember at one time, I'm not sure where I heard it or what the thing was stated. There was a reason why that exit 89 was called Allen Street and not called Mystic. And I'd have to ask the town to look for that information, but I remember that because I remember asking as a kid, why don't they call this Mystic? Like, this would be great. And I remember responses being wanting the traffic to kind of move to the Stoning side of Mystic and then route in that way. So I'm not sure if that, was particular because of the concern of the Route 1 traffic, like it was discussed. Also, the neighbors in that area having a lot of throughway traffic into a neighborhood. So that would be interesting piece, and to make sure that the neighbors are brought around the table definitely early on. But there must be a reason why we're not advertising that exit as Mystic. If we can, then I do think from a marketing aspect, it would bring more people onto the Groton side. But we do need to consider why it was never called Mystic. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anything in particular you need from us? This was just to let us know and for us to express initial concerns?
Correct, yes.
Very good.
If you did feel strongly enough to provide even just as simple as an email of support, we would certainly welcome that, but that's not necessary by any means. As we said, this was, really an opportunity to provide information about the timeline and the process, the general cost, and some of the impacts that we are preliminarily anticipating. A letter of support, as I said, is always welcome, but by no means necessary. Yep.
Okay, very good.
I had one more clarifying question, if you don't mind. How soon would we start to have this discussion with the folks in the neighborhood, would you think?
So regarding the actual signing discussion,
Just in general,
the project. So I would say for the signing, I believe our guidelines, just to sort of round out this topic, I believe our guidelines, nothing would really happen unless the town submitted an application to address and change that particular signing. So that would be something that once the information is provided, would be in your shop to decide, whether or not you wanted to pursue that. As far as the project itself, and getting to that 30% point, if we had approval by the end of this summer, say, then we would expect probably about a year, honestly, until it was, that public information meeting could be held. They do generally try to avoid the summertime months too, so it could be a little bit later. And that would, again, provide time for funding to get in place. Preliminary engineering, actually establishing a three-dimensional survey and starting that design process so that the design team is better able to answer specific questions about impacts. So I'd say a year and a half if we were to be able to advance this in the short term.
Thank you.
Councilor Melendez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, just a question for the mayor. Does a letter of support need a consensus, or does it need a motion?
I was going to ask if there was consensus to have Mr. Burt send the letter of support from the town rather than individual councilors. I assume that's what you asked for.
Sure.
Yes. Mr. Burt, would you look that to me as well? Is there any objection to Mr. Burt sending a letter of support for this project, given where we are in the process? I mean, what we know so far. Okay, I see no objection. So
I just had one quick question to that.
this will be.
You're asking for my support, so I had a quick question of what I was supporting.
Sure.
So we're supporting that something needs to be done there. As far as this particular design, that will be determined based on the public conversations. Is that correct? Or are we supporting the project in its entirety? I'm just trying to understand what we're supporting.
So I would note that essentially the work that we've done to date, there would not be any substantial changes to essentially the engineering behind it. There could be some minor tweaks as far as, curb radii and things of that nature. But the scope that we're putting forward is to signalize the two ramps and to include Sandy Hollow Road into the signalization of that. And that would, I think, be the general consensus of the type of project.
What you presented to us this evening.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, very good. Thank you so much for coming out, and we will have this information, contact information available for the public and for all the counselors. You have it as well. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you for your time.
We appreciate you letting us arrange the agenda as well.
Oh, by all means, yes.
Welcome back to live meetings.
Yes.
All right. We are going on now to 5D 2021-551, acceptance of open space parcel Maple Glen subdivision. This is page 41, I believe, in your packet, and I believe this will be Councilor Heed because Councilor Parker read the other item for us. If you don't mind, Councilor Heed.
Make a motion to recommend a resolution to accept the open space of 20.5 acres of land at the Maple Glen subdivision, Pleasant Valley Road North, Gunjiwamp Road, and Briar Hill Road for park, open space, and recreational purposes. I so move.
Second. Moved by Heed and seconded by Parker. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Jones.
Deb Jones, Assistant Director of Planning and Development Services.
I'm not sure that they're going to be able to hear you. You might have to move up closer, please. Thank you.
There we go. Okay. Thank you. Deb Jones, Assistant Director of Planning and Development Services. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have regarding the acceptance of this open space. In your packet, I believe there was a map showing the location. It's approximately 20.5 acres in the northwest section of town associated with a 14-lot subdivision that the then Planning Commission approved in 2006.
Very good. Mr. Burt.
I just wanted to mention, previously I'd sent some pictures of this property to council. I've walked through it myself, and you're not going to put ball fields in there. It's a lot of terrain changes there, but it's very pretty to walk through, though.
Very good. So we have prior information regarding this particular parcel.
Right.
Thank you. Councilors have questions? Councilor Heat.
Would there be any plans for putting in trails, or this becomes town property, basically? Is that right?
I'm sure we'd reach out to like the Groton Conservation Advocates in GOSA to see if they have it, similar to what's going on there at the King, the Kolnaski School property.
And there are some informal trails that have
Yeah,
been
you can tell
developed
us
there
that.
from the neighbors.
Gotcha, okay. Any other possible uses for it?
There's a lot of terrain relief there.
It's really interesting property.
Yeah,
A
it's
lot
more
of
interesting
ledge
than it looks.
outcrops. Yeah.
There's almost no flat space, and there's like going through ravines, and it's pretty interesting.
Councilor Bordelon.
Thank you. How did we acquire the land exactly?
Through the subdivision process, the Planning and Zoning Commission, well, the then Planning Commission, can require open space as part of an approval.
At some point, if we do decide to put in any like recreation or like it sounds like they're enjoying creating paths there already, so it would be great to maybe open up a dialogue and a platform once we actually have possession of the land, and kind of survey the neighbors and see what they'd like to see in their backyard. But if the trails are starting, it sounds like they're interested in that. But it'd be interesting to hear from them. Thank you.
I will ask the question that's been kicking around. Is this suitable for disc golf?
Oh, that'd be tough, I think.
It would be a really challenging course.
You'd have to see it out there.
Very
yeah.
challenging.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
challenging.
So really, the only possible thing would be nice trails for exploring.
Never
Very
say
good.
never, but man, it would be very challenging.
Okay, very good. Yeah. All right. Seeing no further discussion, we will vote on 2021-551, acceptance of open space parcel Maple Glen subdivision. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved unanimously with 8 counselors. Thank you, Ms. Jones.
Thank you.
We are on to 5E, 2020-41-6, short-term rental discussion. This is on page 43 in your packet, and I believe Mr. Reiner is with us this evening. We do not have a motion in advance for this. This is just an update that Mr. Reiner is providing to get further feedback from us, and I believe the attorney is also looking at some things as well. But I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Reiner. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. John Reiner, Director of Planning and Development Services. You have in front of you a revised draft based upon some of the feedback that I received from the council at a CAL meeting about a month ago. The town's attorney is also looking at this. He and I have had a discussion. There's a few minor changes that he would recommend, but he's looking at a few items. But, really, I think the direction I got from the council at the last CAL that we discussed this was really focusing on a registration system with, I think, some soft approaches, I would say, at just setting some parameters about parking on site, noise, traffic, and just being kind of generally consistent with what's happening in the area. So tried to make it pretty vanilla, but also making sure that there's definitely some general standards, some contact information for people that own the short-term rentals, setting some general standards for the renters on the property, open to any suggestions.
Thank you. Councilor Parker?
Quick question. Am I on? On page, well, it'll be 47 on ours, but it's under section, I don't even know what section it is. The numbering's funny. It's about the noise and nuisance ordinance. Noise and nuisance, disruptive noise shall be prohibited at all times. Quiet hours shall be observed between the hours of 9 p.m. and 8 a.m. Is that for sections, and does that conflict with what we have for noise or compliance with town ordinances is if there's two different ordinances, which one's going to take precedent? And then,
There is no noise ordinance per se for the town. What we go by is when the police get a nuisance complaint and they find it to be a nuisance to the neighbors. So we would, like I said, like John had said, this will be revised, but we would have it fall under at this point what the police do.
Yeah. And also the suggestion of the 9 p.m. to 8 a.m., that's a suggestion. We don't have to put any time in there. We can just
that would be my suggestion, because somebody else's house, they're not doing short-term rental, but they have noise. Short-term rental calls on the house next door, and they have noise. Somebody's going to get in trouble. So I'm just thinking that way. And then my second question is under number 7. So no outdoor advertising signs marketing the STR such as but not limited to for rent. But there's some places that put for rent signs in their home. So how's that going to, you have to distinguish that? Somebody could be renting their home, out-of-town person that owns the property. How are you going to distinguish that?
Again, whatever you're looking for, a number of items in here are some suggestions and things to get conversation starters. So if you really want, if the goal is no outdoor advertising signs marketing the short-term rental such as a short-term rental and ending at that, it leaves some discretion to the enforcement officer if that's even your goal. If you're not concerned about signage for rent, then we can just delete that section altogether, because, right now, I look around many coastal communities that have summer rentals, winter rentals, year-round rentals. There might be a sign out front that says, summer rental, academic year rental, whatever it is. Again, I'm looking for some guidance on what the council's looking for. So if a majority of you say, yeah, let's just strike that, we can certainly do that too. If you're looking for this to be just more consistent with what our general policies are regarding any type of rental, then yeah, that might be a section that we just, that number that we could just strike.
I'm thinking that. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Zephyr.
I had two concerns. One, in the definition of terms, section 2, it says a short-term rental is rental for 30 days or fewer. I think that the problems that come up with these sublets or with these non-owner rentals over a period of time could come from someone who rents the place for the summer, or, which is of course more than 30 days, or from what other towns are seeing is that people who have houses near the shore like to come down to the houses in the summertime, but rent them out in the winter. And those are frequently occupied by students who will pile a whole lot of people into one house. And other communities have had troubles with those things. And I think this policy should cover that. So I think the term limiting the policy or the ordinance to people who rent for only 30 days or less is probably too short. That's, Joe's shot from the hip. My second shot from the hip is that it doesn't address the possibility of sublets. Someone could rent the house and then sublet it out for short-term rentals. And this deals with owners who are doing short-term rentals, but not with renters who are doing subletting. So those are two notions that I think could be addressed in this. I think it would be useful.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask one thing. As these ideas come up, like from the two counselors so far, I'd like to hear a little dialogue from others as to whether you actually want us to change those things. Because right now it's still nebulous if I only hear from one person.
Yeah.
Right.
And then to respond to at least the first item that you brought up about the 30 days. So what I took as our task here was coming up with an ordinance dealing with short-term rentals. Generally, how many areas are defining short-term rentals are less than 30 days, as opposed to an academic type of rental situation or even a full summer rental situation. For many years, I've been watching a lot of this happen in communities that are surround where I live. Particularly Narragansett, Rhode Island, has dealt with the summer rentals and then the academic year rentals. They've looked into different ordinances dealing with how many non-relatives can live in a household together. They've been to all kinds of different courts about it and argued about it, and it becomes a very sticky wicket. And I think if we were to go down that track, that's almost an entirely different type of ordinance or regulation. If we're looking at longer period of time, limiting household types, I think we're getting on really shaky ground if we were to start looking into those.
May I respond? Madam Mayor?
Yes, you have time left.
The thing that we started this out from was that local folk who had their homes in these areas of short terms were being found the short-term renters frequently a nuisance. The way they parked their cars, the parties they had, the use of their careless disposition of their trash, et cetera, people that are bringing the neighborhood down. And I think those are the same risks you would find in longer-term rentals, like someone renting the place for the whole summer. It's not his place, doesn't have a relationship to the community, doesn't care about the neighbors. So a summer rental for the 3 months of the summer or the 4 months of the summer would be longer than the 30 days, and so that's why I'm concerned for that. And I'm also concerned about the winter rentals because they tend to be people that are involved with activities such as school. And these are the same, they bring the same kind of problems to the community that we're trying to address in this short-term rental thing. So we're not going to cover all the bases with this. The problem still can exist despite our efforts with this ordinance.
Your time is up, Councilor Zafari. Thank you.
And we can certainly talk to our attorney about options for that, whether it's incorporate. I don't think you want to keep the short-term portion. It would either be an additional section or a separate ordinance.
Okay, before we get too far, let's just get general consensus with Councilor Parker's points regarding consistency with non-short-term rentals as far as noise and signage. Is there consensus to agree with what she had stated her concerns were? I concur.
I mean, should we commit it to writing to make sure that it's clear?
No, they're taking notes.
Oh, they're taking notes.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure because
we're not expecting a vote tonight on it.
Yeah, we're not voting. They're going.
What we're changing or asking to add.
So I think it would be number 6 for noise and nuisance. Maybe it would just read disruptive noise shall be prohibited at all times.
It's just.
Or we could even strike that entire number as well as.
I think you want to give a warning at least. That's part of the thing we would hold them to. They're certainly going to get called.
And that is what our public safety officials would do with any other person. I think that's what, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were looking for consistency with people who are not short-term rentals.
So strike the second sentence. Is that right?
Yeah, I think. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then the same thing with your signage, keep it the same as what other people have?
Yes.
That'll match our zoning ordinance. Right.
Any objection to the second point as far as making signage match what we do for normal households? Councilor Borla?
I just had a question about 6. Disruptive, I guess it's, what's disruptive noise? Like, is there going to be...
That's already something that's handled by the police if there's a complaint call.
I mean, I just think it's vague and it could be done by the police as well, but I think it's important to describe like somewhat in detail what disruptive other ordinances I have seen when I was reading this one over the weekend. In their noise section, it was a little bit more detailed because what is considered disruptive to one might not be another. like, a young girl, jump roping at, 8 o'clock in the driveway is not disruptive to one, but just because I say it's disruptive doesn't mean that it really is. So I just think that it opens up, if it's so vague, I think it should be, I don't know, but I'm not sure what it should be, but I think something, I don't know.
There might be something in the actual legal nuisance, law that we could take some wording out of. We'll look at that.
I can agree with Councilor Parker that it should be, similar, so that when you're enforcing the town one, that also the short-term rental one kind of mimics, I think would make it easier for law enforcement as well.
Agreed.
And then Councilor Perry's concern, I think you've addressed that. Is there any objection to the conversation that Mr. Reiner and Councilor Perry had regarding consistency with rentals as far as length of rentals? Councilor Overy and then...
I think he was in two different sections, though. And I appreciate what he's saying, but we're really looking at short-term rentals right now, and we're not looking at winter rentals, because those are usually at least 6 months, and it's a whole different category, I think.
Well, that's the question, is whether you want to start looking into that. It could, whether it's added into this or as a separate ordinance.
I think it would be good if we could just get a good handle on this. And if I might ask a question?
Sure.
I can wait.
No, go ahead. Well,
No, I was going to say the same thing.
Okay. Did you review at all what the companies put out for rules? The companies that you get in touch with to get the units or whatever, don't they have some kind of rules that they work with?
Usually each one's, I've seen many different versions. There's no uniform version. I think we just have to really decide what's best for the town.
Oh, no, I understand that. I'm not suggesting otherwise. I'm just asking if there was things in there that might add to what we're looking at here. The reason I say that is if you go in through a company and rent a space and there's destruction to the property, that company has to come in and do the repairs. So I think they would have a very vested interest in how the rules that go with the renting. So I was just suggesting that maybe there's something there that we could learn from. That's all.
Sure.
Yeah, I can look at the two major platforms to just see if there's anything in their rules that we can glean and put into this ordinance.
Additionally, when we get into the public process, there might be other ideas that come out that you end up incorporating. Not that this isn't part of the public process as
Councilor
we go
Dean?
further.
This is, I think, your second.
Thank you. Okay, sorry, you threw me off. So a couple of things, I guess. First of all, I'd like to keep it focused in sort of like a baseline kind of approach. So I think this looks good overall to me. I have just two questions, I think. Does this address the major concerns that have been expressed by neighbors, and is it something that's accepted by the Airbnb operators? Like, does anyone find anything objectionable to this based on the conversations you've had?
I think one thing you're going to, it's hard to tell from the operators, but in terms of neighbors, some would not want them in any residential areas. I did speak, I've spoken with Rich Cody about it. His recommendation is this approach: get a handle on how many are out there, and if you're licensing them, you could also always not license them again, and that's a way to weed out the bad actors. But to get a handle on it for a year or two, and then if you want to go further, go further. Baby steps was his wording. So.
Right. No, I remember him saying that. So the follow-up question is, we have the ordinance. Is there a penalty if you run an Airbnb and you don't register, you don't get a permit?
Well, that's something we're looking for a little guidance, but also working with Rich on that, so we can certainly put together a fine.
There's got to be. I mean.
But then there might have to be an appeal process.
Right.
So again, before we get too far, we're looking at, do you like the framework? Is it general enough? and the question that I'll keep going back to as we look to potentially broaden this is, what is the purpose of us doing this? Is it to preserve our existing housing stock? Is it to make sure all the neighborhoods are quiet and all the houses are very similar to each other and how they're operated? Again, thinking about what are your goals of what you're looking to do here, because we're hearing very different things from very different interests. Some people want nothing run and operated by a corporation. Some only want rooms sublet in your primary residence. Others want to just let it operate as a free capital market. So, and there's a lot of things in between.
All right, I yield the floor. Thank you.
Councilor Baumgartner, then Melendez.
Thank you, and thank you for your work on this the last month. Should this document be approved tonight, if you could walk us through the compliance and enforcement perspective. You get a call from a resident complaining about an Airbnb maybe too loud, maybe they are overstaying the 30 days, or they're renting out for clearly more than 30 days. You had talked about some of the penalties, but in your eye, well, I guess before I follow up with the in your eye, if you could just walk us through, if this were to pass, what the penalties would be for running afoul of the law.
Right.
Or the
in terms of penalties, that's something we mentioned. We'll have to work on the penalty part. But in terms of enforcement, part of this ordinance requires contact information for someone that can be readily available to answer any issues when there's complaints. If a complaint went to the police, now if it's a police issue, the police will go ahead and go out there besides contacting. Now, we've spoken with a company that, it might be difficult for us to take this on under current staffing. There are companies that specialize in this, and you charge enough of a fee that it pays for the company to do a lot of the enforcement and running, tracking things. That's what we'd probably be looking at, so that they would track everything, give us reports, we'd have access to it. But they'd be the ones that would help get things in line if there was complaints. There's some things that have to be handled that night, like noise, but there's other things that would be more of an investigation, like ongoing parking issues, or that type of thing. But either way, the avenues would be covered, whether it's by police or by staff or another company.
Yeah, I think a lot of the first line of defense for initial noise complaints and other things, it will often be after hours. It'll be our police force. But, kind of taking a step back, walking through the process, if this were adopted tonight, which nobody's saying is going to happen, but if it was,
we do have changes to make.
Yeah, there's a lot of changes to make. We have to go through a public hearing. There's a lot more public input. But just people that operate a short-term rental, which is less than 30 days. So if you rent for more than 30 days, you don't fall under this category. So that, just want to make that very clear. Then people would apply for that permit, get registered. One of the other things in here that we have to take a little bit more of a look at is, I know a couple of council members at our last meeting had asked about annual inspections of the property by the fire marshal. That might not be a viable thing to do. Talking to the town attorney, I want to talk to a couple of the fire marshals in town, if they even have the staff to do that, the cost, the time. It might be something that is more complaint driven, and inspections could happen, but we also have to be very aware of people's Fourth Amendment rights. We can't just go show up and start, going into people's houses without any rights. And then we would track what's out there. I think also that would give us a good handle on what are the problems, if there are problems that exist. Are the problems with short-term rentals, or is it just other rentals, or is it owners? Is it, Joe Smith on whatever street that just has a pool party at his house every single night in the summer, and that is, one of the bigger noise complaints that we get. I think it'll be interesting to track where are the short-term rentals, what are the complaints we're getting, and then what other noise complaints are we getting with just other individually owner-occupied homes too.
I know this past, do I still have a little bit? Mm-hmm. This past legislative session, the legislature approved a change that legalized accessory dwelling units, granting it as of right as opposed to a special use permit through the zoning enforcement. now with that law coming online, should there be someone who wants to use their ADU as a short-term rental, what would that look like within, I guess, current law? And do you think not having an ordinance could there be issues down the road if we don't have an ordinance in place?
No, because we already allowed ADUs by right, so that was not, special permits were not a major stumbling block in Groton, at least, within the town of Groton, for people getting accessory dwelling units. Could we see, as more people are realizing the potential income benefits of short-term rentals, could we see more accessory dwelling units pop up? Potentially, but I have not seen a major growth curve in the amount of ADUs.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
If I have when you have your list down,
I'm sorry?
I had another question when you get down on your list.
Yeah, I'll add you. Before we go to another person, I just want to clarify, are we all in consensus that we want this ordinance to be for short-term rentals and not go into the bigger academic year rentals or more than that? Yes, okay. I think that answers everything that people have raised so far. So we are on to Melendez, Granatowski, Obrey. Councilor Melendez.
Thank you. Yes, you were asking, what's our big goal? I think having this problem is a good thing. It means that people want to come here and spend their tourism dollars here. There's a lot of towns around the country that would love to have this problem. But I would like the short-term rentals to be largely a free market, but I think what this ordinance should do is regulate complaints from neighboring properties, which I think this does a really good job of. So I like the creation of the registration system and the inclusion of the annual fee. I hope, it's not in here, but I just hope there's no sort of talk of capping the amount of licenses in the town. And the other thing that I would like to say, the local property representative, is this done in other towns? How realistic is it? Because it's a good idea, I think, and it seems like it would be funded by the STR owners themselves, but is it something that is done in other places? Did you get it from somewhere? Because I guess they'd have to sort of all get together and put in money to hire someone.
Not necessarily. I think in many instances that would make sure that we don't have too many short-term rentals that are operated by people that live in other states, and that they're basically absentee landlords, that, okay, maybe they have a management company that they utilize. I think we're going to see some of that happen anyway. Looking at short-term rentals in other towns, I was looking up some information in my own town and came across someone who has a short-term rental, and they live in London, yet they have a house that they're renting in South Kingstown, Rhode Island. Okay, to me, that seems like it's a little bit of a problem. I don't know exactly how they're managing it. Obviously, they have a company cleaning it after each, but these are very profitable, so people are coming up with creative ways of managing and cleaning the property. But I think the important point there is we want to make sure we have a contact person, a local representative, that if, John, myself, or someone, the police department gets a complaint, oh, okay, it's at this address, here's the person we call, and they can be on site almost immediately.
Okay, so you're thinking more like it's a volunteer person who owns one of these in the town, and you just call that person. Is that what? No,
I'm thinking that if Joe Smith owns a short-term rental in Groton, Joe Smiths need to be on the card as the local property representative. So it's not a volunteer. It's some companies, if they own numerous short-term rentals, maybe they'll have it being run by a management company. But we want a person who has an interest in the property.
I see. I was misunderstanding. You're saying each each individual unit will have their own local property representative. Okay.
Yes.
I was thinking there was one for all the town.
No.
Okay. That's good. So I think the goals that I want this ordinance to hit, I think this does a pretty good job of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start. Mr. Bradham sent an email with some suggestions, and the very last line of the email he sent, I think, would address the verbiage that is used here would address some of the things that we had talked about. It says the applicant, this is under the section for issuance or denial of permit. The applicant fails to comply with any state or local laws or any rules and regulations adopted pursuant thereto. Like just something simple like that, I think, would cover us so that the police could show up if there was a noise complaint or the sign thing was not being handled. Something, one simple line like that, I think, would be broad enough to be able to cover that. I agree, you know, we hire town attorneys for a reason because we're not lawyers, with the exception of Councilor Saperi. But we need their advice, and their advice is go slowly. So start off with something basic like a registration system. I do like the idea of assessing a fee in order to operate a short-term rental. Therefore, we can hire this company that is going to do kind of the oversight for us, the management for us. We may need that person that's on call, but I think that's a good first step, is getting everything on the books so we know who's out there. Those people are going to bear the burden of the cost and not the rest of the taxpayers. I really like the local contact, and I would like to find out if the safety inspection is something that we are able to do, understanding full well that we can't just knock on people's doors. Trying to think what else. There's anything in here, but I agree that, oh, and there's also a section on the penalties. That's something that we'll probably need legal advice on as well, as far as if they are operating one. We have scofflaws currently that are operating hospitality ventures, and they've been told to shut down and they're just completely ignoring. So we do need some help with that aspect of it. But in general, I think it doesn't sound like we're too far off as far as the comments that I'm hearing. Let me stop my clock.
I just wanted to mention, I did like some of the language in Mr. Bradham's email, and I gave my thoughts to the planning staff, but I also sent it on to Rich Cody to look at that. The one thing I've discussed with him about having, that would make you, though, be part of your, I forget where the primary residence. In order to do it, that's something the attorney recommended against, because that would capture a whole lot of the things in town. He recommended that could be a real nightmare legal-wise. But I like a lot of the other language in there, and I think we could incorporate some.
And Mr. Dunn is here this evening, and thank you. He's the one that had, the first time I heard of the company that handles the registration and everything. So thank you for suggesting that to us, Mr. Dunn. And that's all I have at this point. And Councilor, did you have your turn?
No.
Councilor Aubry?
That's all right. Now?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to suggest that perhaps at the time that they register their rentals, that as we do at a closing, there could be an affidavit that at least we have for smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detection in the house. You know, you do it now with a new house or house sale, so I think it would be something that people would not be surprised by, and they have to sign it.
Good idea.
Is there any objection to that? That is a good idea. Thank you. We draw on all our talents here. Everybody has these different
It's okay.
talents.
Yeah, just quickly, I was going to mention, I was reading some ordinances in other communities, and I think some have even have that in their ordinances about requiring a carbon monoxide detector, like you suggested. I think that's a great idea.
Any objection to Councilor Aubry's suggestion? She still has time left. Are you objecting to it? Okay, Councilor Aubry, you still have time if you would like to speak more.
I'm sorry?
You still have time?
No, that's all I had.
Okay.
Doing a good job.
Okay. Counselor Bordelon.
Thank you. Regarding the safety inspections, like you just stated, it could be hard or expensive. Some of the ordinance I had read, it was on the responsibility of the owner, and like what Counselor Aubry had brought up with the smoke detectors and the carbon monoxide detectors, one of the ones that I read last night stated that, as well as making sure that they also had fire extinguishers in certain areas like the garage and by the laundry, or in the kitchen area under the sink or something. So there was small modifications, and there was ways in which they could prove that these things were installed. It was one place had receipts, others had, if they had a contractor install, wired. So I think there's ways that we can kind of make that safe from a safety approach. So I agree with Councilor Aubry's observations on that. My question is with number 4, restrictions on use. Some of that could be, I was reading someone in the ordinance in another town where a person decided to elope at a Airbnb. They had somebody come. It slept 8, people could stay there, and they had a small gathering in the yard. It wasn't like a rock band concert wedding with, people up on chairs smashing bottles, or, the big weddings. But it was a very modest elope. And so I don't know if I agree with that number 4 necessarily. I've seen other things where people were saying they had, they were celebrating a certain party or something in particular. So this could be, number 4 could be kind of limiting. I think,
I can see that point, yeah.
I think if someone looked out their window and saw a bride and groom in a yard and said, wait, the ordinance says no weddings, but there's just a justice of the peace that was hired from our town, and 8 people were there that the building can accommodate, I think they're in their right to have a little elopement in the yard on a nice property. Some of these properties could be up on an ocean front or something like that, and so that could get a little vague. Define wedding or
So actually,
that's tough.
Yeah, that is a slippery slope. We've had a lot of issues with that in rental properties, or people renting out great location properties in towns, and then there's a 100-person, 200-person wedding happening on someone's property they don't even own. I think we could probably address that via, includes those events for no more than the allowed guests on the site, or something like that.
I think that's actually pretty fair. I mean, I think it would be appropriate.
Another thing with the fire detectors, it'd be nice if they could also include photos of where they had those things at as part of their application pack.
That was one of the ones that I had seen. They had the fire extinguishers and smoke detectors.
And if memory serves correct, actually, I think both the 2 major platforms, Airbnb and VRBO, both require smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, and fire extinguishers within the units.
Is that the other 2?
Do I have one?
24 seconds.
One other thing I saw under the restrictions part, if there was a way, there might be a line that we want to add, where if they submit something in writing to the town who's overseeing this, then it could be possibly approved if it, was in question, and that was another way to handle the wedding size thing, If someone says, nope, it's going to be at 5 o'clock, there's just 4 people, we are going to get married on the property, and they submit a written notice for anything outside that. So I think it's important to keep a line so that we are working with folks and allowing that. So, thank you.
Just a quick clarification. Page 46, Counselor Aubry had talked about having them sign an affidavit, right? Number 4, fire and building, says they have to have these things as part of the permit. Would that be the affidavit?
Yeah. Rather than having to have an inspection, they could sign an affidavit.
But if they're applying for the...
We will make them sign and swear that everything's accurate in that.
As part of the permit, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to add to Councilor Bordelon's part, restrictions on use. Isn't that up to the property owner? What if the property owner allows certain things to happen at the property? So are we telling the owner they can't do anything at their property, short-term rental property? I'm just throwing this monkey wrench out there because someone's gonna ask. I'm renting to somebody, and they've asked me permission to use my property for this, but the town has now restricted me on doing this part.
That's really part of any ordinance or restrictions as it is. The town has to decide if they want to allow 100 people in the backyard. You know.
Yeah, I think right now, actually, you can have a wedding at your house for you and your family that live in the house. We've generally allowed things like that. I can't remember the exact numbers or limitations, but for people not part of your household and renting that out, we've had a lot of trouble with that, and that's not allowed within. We've actually gone to court with people about that. So that's something we don't allow outside of the owners to do.
Wait a minute, so that's currently in an ordinance?
I believe that's in an ordinance. I'd have to double check exactly where it is, but I know that's something that we've had trouble with before, with people renting out homes for large events and for commercial operations having large events that were not permitted.
Okay, I'm getting ready to throw another monkey wrench in here. That's like telling the people who do movies that rent a property, then they're not allowed to do that. Think about it. If somebody says rents a short-term rental for their home for a movie, they can't have that movie there.
It all depends on the size. That's what it really starts getting into.
So this has to be changed to not limited to, because if somebody says, like I said, they're renting it out short-term. We just had a movie at one of our businesses and stuff. How's that going to look when someone's trying to do the same exact thing? So
we'll talk to our attorneys about it. I think, though, if you don't limit the size, there's no point in the ordinance. I think no one will be satisfied then, though.
But did we limit the size on the other thing? I'm just looking at it from different aspects.
That's the number one thing we're going to get complaints about with this, though, is the things like that. People don't want that next to their houses. Yeah.
But is that up to the owner? If it's not written anywhere, I know we're coming up with this now, but if that's not currently written anywhere, if it's not an ordinance or a zoning thing, they could fight that and there could be a problem.
I think there is a current prohibition against that. I don't remember if it's in the zoning or in an ordinance. Let me get back to you, but I know that we've had issues with that, and we've successfully enforced against non-owners renting out properties and holding large wedding and other events.
But I'm asking about an owner. I want it from the owner's perspective.
Well, the owner can do something, but if the owner's renting it, you can't then rent it to somebody who's not the owner. That's where the problem, because then it becomes a wedding venue. It's not a single-family residence anymore. Then it becomes a commercial operation. And I think that's where it fell under this. I know that we've had issues with it. Let me look in. I don't have all the answers in front of me, but I know that we've looked into it. I know we've had issues with it. I know we've gone to court with people about it before. Let me find the exact provision, and I'll get back to you in the next few days.
So if that's the case, then maybe we should use the verbiage from that in this exact verbiage instead of trying to, just to be consistent.
Sure. But bear in mind, this is also, the point of this is to fill in gaps that aren't covered by other ones. So part of it is to come up with some new rules, too.
And some of it's looking at ordinances versus regulations. If things are in regulations, then there can be grandfathering. So if you're concerned, I don't think there'd be too many happy people if we allowed short-term rentals to have weddings of unlimited size. I think we'd have some really concerned citizens in town, because then you'd see things like that happening a lot more. So let us do a little bit more homework on that one.
Okay, so far, I think we're good with the exception of the things that you're going to be checking on.
And let's compile a list and shoot it back to the council just to make sure we've covered everything. We'll shoot the list of what we've compiled here just to make sure.
And can you do something with, ask the attorney about the size of the fees, and then maybe compare it to the size of hiring this company, and make sure that it's going to balance?
I have a couple
Please.
seconds left.
Yeah.
I would just suggest that whatever we come up with, it's going to be the best we can to begin, and we'll have to make modifications as we go forward. It's almost impractical to think we can get everything into this. But anyways, that's kind of my thought, that let's work on what we've got here with these suggestions and get something so it's together, see how it works, and then review it again. I think just getting them registered would be great. It'll be a big improvement. It puts responsibility on people, and I think it'll work quite well. But we're going to have to learn some of the nuances as we go on.
Do you have a quick question?
Yeah, is there a point where maybe this draft, I mean, it'll go online, it's part of our packet, obviously, but it would be helpful to extend the hand to the community and put a public comment that's defined just for a night on this as a first read, or what, you know, obviously we're making the decision on it, but it would be nice to extend the hand to the community and say, you know, here's where we're at, and open it up for community questions or thoughts on where we're at so far, so they can speak publicly and we can maybe respond to and have comments, if
I
that's
would just
possible.
want the attorney sign off before we do that, right? That we're not putting in something in there that shouldn't be in there.
Yep.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I just want to make sure the attorney signs off on language before we put anything out there. Kind of what I don't want is something that's clearly not allowed by law and then people get excited about it.
Right.
Yeah. So kind of at least get the first real draft done.
Yeah, this is still a rough draft. I'd like this to be a refined draft
Yes.
before we really start putting,
But
you know.
I totally agree with you, though.
Right, I wasn't saying that this draft per se, but I'm just saying if we could add that as a step in this process.
And
that's all.
as Councilor Bordelon said, this is part of our packet, and those of you listening at home, feel free to reach out to council@groton-ct.gov and send your comments or concerns. I think we've been working on this for several years now, and we've heard a lot from the public at many different steps along the way, so we're still open to hearing more, like Mr. Bradham sent us an email just this week, so please feel free to reach out with comments that you might have. Thank you.
Can we do a Facebook post on it too, to kind of maybe guide people to it?
Well, as Mr.
As soon as we get that first
Okay.
draft, yeah,
Perfect.
certainly.
Thank you.
Put it on our website, separate it on our website up
Thank you.
front.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Reiner, for your work on this. We appreciate it.
As
Have a good
always.
night. Okay.
Before we do all that, can we do 5 minutes?
Well, why don't we do that, and then while he's getting everything done, people can break. Okay. So we are on to 2021-439 United Steelworkers Collective Bargaining Agreement, and this is potential executive session. This is on page 49 of your packet. Hello. Let's see. To provide just a quick overview before I read the motion for executive session?
Sure. We're here tonight to discuss a tentative agreement that was reached with the United Steelworkers, which is our public works bargaining unit, which also covers the golf course and Parks and Rec and the water pollution control facility. The union notified us actually this afternoon that they had ratified, so looking forward to just going over the tentative agreement and then seeking your approval of it.
Thank you. Okay, I hereby move that the members of the Town Council, together with Town Manager John Burt, Assistant Town Manager Robert Zagami, and Town Attorney Eileen Duggan, go into executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy and/or negotiations with respect to collective bargaining with the United Steelworkers Unit. This action is taken without prejudice to the Council's right to discuss such matters in a private meeting pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes, Section 1202. I so move.
Second.
Moved by Granatowski, seconded by Heed. Any discussion? All those in favor of going into executive session for the stated purpose, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Any abstentions?
Yeah, we do
7 in
need a break.
favor, 1 opposed, a parry, and 0 abstentions. So we are in executive session. So it is 8:26 that we went into executive session. So councilors, while Mr. Greeley is getting everything organized, we will have a break. is 8:47, and council is out of executive session. We are still working on item 2021-439, Steelworkers Bargaining Agreement. I hereby move that the town council approve the request for funds necessary to implement the agreement between the town of Groton and the United Steelworkers of America, AFL-CIO, Local Union 9411, for the period July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2022.
Second.
Moved by Granatowski, seconded by Zepari. Seeing no discussion, we will vote. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask, we are on to 5G, which is 2021-558 Town Manager Performance Review. This is also a potential executive session, but what I needed to know, so we can let the videography staff know, will there be other business following the conclusion of the
There is a
executive
motion though still, so I've let Sean know to stay.
Oh, that's right, I forgot. Thank you.
What was the answer?
There is other business. I forgot there's a motion. All right, so Mr. Birch, did you just want to explain what we're doing?
Sure. Doing my annual performance evaluation. It's actually been about a year and a half, I think. A lot of it due to COVID. But, so we, as usual, go into executive session to go over any reviews.
All right. I hereby move that the members of the Town Council Committee of the Whole and Town Manager John Burt go into executive session pursuant to General Statute Section 1206A concerning the appointment, employment, performance, evaluation, health, or dismissal of a public officer or employee in regards to the Town Manager. I so move.
Second.
Moved by Granatowski, seconded by Zepari. All those in favor of going into executive session as per the motion, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved unanimously. It is 8:50. We are into executive session, and we just need to give Mr. Greeley a chance to get everything set over there, and if we can turn our mics off again. Okay, good evening. We are out of executive session at 9:43, and I needed to note that Councilor Franco arrived at 8:52 p.m., so we are at 9 councilors right now. And I have a motion. I hereby move to recommend the full council to make changes to the town manager's contract as discussed in executive session. Moved by Granatoski and seconded by Zepari. Seeing no discussion, we will vote. All those in favor of the motion for the manager's contract, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved unanimously with 9 councilors. We are on to other business. Is there any other business?
I just had a quick question about the motion we just did. So for it to be fully agreed to, the questions that were asked, we'll get an update in the email?
Yep.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
If there's no other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Do you have your hand up?
I just wanted to kind of put out the fact that the beautification committee wants to come in and do a bit of a presentation.
Councilor Aubrey, can you turn your microphone
Turn your
on?
mic, please.
Works better the other way. The beautification committee wants to come in and talk with the council, and has a request to make, a monetary request. And you can kind of see what they've been doing. I don't want to take all your time, but we've started a new project. Well, it's a project we had, but now we're really concentrating on it. And that's to get our first mural up. And we've been working on plantings and a lot of other things, and I just thought it would be good if they came in and they were recognized, and you could see what the needs are. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Parker, seconded by Baumgartner. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved unanimously with 9 councilors, and it is 9:48 p.m. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Be well.